good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, context is everything. Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook, cover to cover. Today, we finish up World War I with the Treaty of Versailles. I realize that in talking about this, I've referred to it as the Treaty of Paris, incorrectly so. So, it's the Treaty of Versailles. And there's some interesting stuff I saw on the map of how the map changed before World War I and after. So I'll show you that in a little bit. Stick around, like, subscribe. Thank you. John Michael, context is everything, yes. Making the Peace, Chapter 27, Section 5, page 694. Read every page here. Setting the scene. Just weeks after the war ended, President Woodrow Wilson boarded a steamship bound for France. He had decided to go in person to Paris, where Allied leaders would make the peace. Wilson was certain that he could solve the problems of old Europe. "Tell me what is right," Wilson urged his advisors, "and I'll fight for it." Sadly, it would not be that easy. Europe was shattered, a shattered continent. Its problems and those of the world would not be solved at the Paris Peace Conference or for many years afterwards. The costs of war. The costs of war. The human and material costs of war were staggering. More than 8.5 million people were dead. Double that number had been wounded. Many of them had been handicapped for life. Famine threatened many regions. The devastation was made even worse in 1918 by a deadly pandemic or influenza. A pandemic is the spread of a disease across an entire country, continent, or in this case, the whole world. In just a few months, the flu swept around the world, killing more than 20 million people, twice as much as the world war itself. Shaken and disillusioned, people everywhere. Financial burdens. In the battle zones from France to Russia, homes, farms, factories, roads, and churches had been shelled into rubble. Shelled bombs. Gunfire. The costs of rebuilding and paying off huge national war debts would burden an already battered world. Shaken and disillusioned, people everywhere felt bittered about the war. The Allies blamed the conflict on their defeated foes and insisted that the losers make reparations or payments for the war damages. The stunned Central Powers, the losing side, who had viewed the armistice as a ceasefire rather than a surrender, looked for scapegoats on whom they could blame their defeat. Political turmoil. Under the stress of war, governments had collapsed in Russia, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. Political radicals dreamed of building a new social order from the chaos, as revolutionaries in Russia seemed to be doing. Conservatives warned against the spread of Bolshevism, or communism, as it was soon to be called. Oh, Bolshevism is another name for communism? I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. Where's the charger? I didn't know that at all. We're still going. Good. Gonna plug in here. All set. And moving on. Bolshevism. Interesting. Unrest also swept through Europe's colonial empires. African and Asian soldiers had discovered that the imperial powers were not as invincible as they seemed. Colonial troops returned home with a more cynical view of Europeans and renewed hopes for independence. The word cynical meaning the pursuit of personal gain. So if you're cynical, that means that you believe people are doing things strictly for the pursuit of personal gain rather than for the betterment of the greater good, this, that, the other, all this and that. It's that they're doing it for selfish reasons. You are cynical, you think everyone's selfish. Cynical, you think everyone's selfish. The Paris Peace Conference. New heading. To a weary world, Woodrow Wilson seemed a symbol of hope. His talk of self-determination and democracy raised expectations for a just and lasting peace, even in a defeated Germany. Crowds cheered wildly as he rode along the Paris boulevards. 3 big wins. Or the big 3, never mind. The big 3. Wilson was one of the 3 strong personalities who dominated the Paris Peace Conference. A dedicated reformer, Wilson was also sure of his rightness, that he could be hard to work with. Wilson was so sure of his rightness that he could be hard to work with, urging peace without victory. He wanted 14 points to be the basis of peace. The other Allied leaders at the peace conference had different aims. The British Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, knew that his people demanded harsh treatment for Germany. He promised to build a post-war Britain, fit for heroes, a goal that would cost money. A French leader, Georges Clemenceau, bore the nickname the Tiger for his fierce anti-German war policy. His chief goal was to weaken Germany so that it could never threaten France again. Didn't work. Mr. Wilson bores me with his 14 points, complained Clemenceau. Why, God Almighty has only 10. Why God Almighty has only 10? 10 commandments. Why does Woodrow have 14? Right. Difficult issues. Crowds of other representatives circled around the big 3 with their own demands and interests. Oh, so the big 3 are Woodrow, David Lloyd George, and Georges Clemenceau. The Italian Prime Minister, Vittorio Orlando, insisted that the Allies honor their secret agreement to give Italy lands that were once ruled by Austria-Hungary. Such secret agreements violated Wilson's principle of self-determination. Self-determination posed other problems. Many people who had been ruled by Russia, Austria-Hungary, or the Ottoman Empire now demanded national states of their own. The territories claimed by these peoples often overlapped, so it was impossible to satisfy them all. Faced with conflicting demands, Woodrow Wilson had to compromise on his 14 points. Shouldn't close my eyes, I lost my place. On one point, though, he stood firm. His dream was to create an international League of Nations. The League would be based on the idea of collective security, a system in which a group of nations act as one to preserve peace of all. With the League in place, Wilson felt sure that many mistakes made in Paris could be corrected in time. The ghastly, I'm adding ghastly in, the Treaty of Versailles. New heading. In June 1919, the peacemakers summoned representatives of the new German Republic into the Palace of Versailles outside of Paris. The Germans were ordered to sign the treaty drawn up by the Allies. The Germans' delegates read the document with a growing horror. It forced Germany to assume all blame for causing the war. It also imposed huge reparations that would put an already damaged German economy under staggering burden. Reparations meaning fix the roads, fix the buildings you destroyed, fix this, fix that in all of the countries that were involved. On paper, it sounds like it makes sense, but in practice, the reparations cover not only the destruction caused by the war, but also the pensions for millions of Allied soldiers or their widows and families. The total cost of German reparations would come to over $30 billion. Is that $30 billion retroactively to 1919? Because if it's $30 billion retroactive to 1919, that's got to be over $1 trillion, right? It has to be. Inflation-wise, right? If it's $30 billion in 2001, that's actually... it's probably not that bad, actually. But I think it's weighted for that era. Other clauses were aimed at weakening Germany. The treaty severely limited the size of once feared German military. It returned Alsace and Lorraine to France, removed hundreds of square miles of territory from western and eastern Germany, and stripped Germany of its overseas colonies. The Germans signed because they had no choice, but German resentment for the Treaty of Versailles would poison the international climate for 20 years and help spark an even deadlier war. Right. Here is the map of what it looked like before and after World War I, Europe that is. And wasn't Russia on our side, United States side, Britain side, weren't they? Because they lost a lot. Maybe they weren't. Maybe I misremembered that. That's entirely possible. But I'm really noting that Russia is this big before, and it is significantly smaller after. And I thought they were on our side. Why did they lose so much land? I could totally be wrong, though. I could totally be wrong. I'm very open to that. Widespread dissatisfaction. New heading. The Allies drew up a separate treaty with the Central Powers. Like the Treaty of Versailles, these treaties left widespread dissatisfaction. Self-determination in Eastern Europe. Where German, Austrian, and Russian empires had once ruled, a band of new nations emerged. They included Baltic states of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Poland regained independence after more than 100 years of foreign rule. 3 new republics, Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Hungary, rose in the old Habsburg heartland. In the Balkans, the peacemakers created a new South Slav state, Yugoslavia, dominated by Serbia. Eastern Europe, however, remained a center of conflict, as you will read. Mandate system. European colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific had looked to the Paris Peace Conference with high hopes. Many people from these lands had fought alongside Europeans. Colonial leaders expected that the peace would bring new respect and an end to imperial rule. They took up Wilson's call for self-determination. However, the leaders at Paris applied self-determination only to parts of Europe. Outside Europe, the victorious Allies added to the overseas empires. The treaty created a system of mandates, territories administered by Western powers. Britain and France gained mandates over Germany, German colonies, and Africa and Ottoman lands in the Middle East. In theory, mandates were to be held and modernized until they were able to stand alone. In practice, they became European colonies. From Africa to the Middle East, across Asia, colonized people felt betrayed by the peacemakers. Unfulfilled goals. Here we are, nearing the end of our time here, and nearing the end of this chapter, which was actually quite short for it being about World War I, which had 200 pages leading up to it. Building context. I guess the events were kind of straightforward, but I feel like there could have been more. Unfulfilled goals. Germany was not only a power dissatisfied by peace. Germany was not only the power dissatisfied by the peace. Italy was angry because it did not get all the lands promised in the secret treaty with the Allies. Japan protested the refusal of Western nations to recognize its claims in China. At the same time, China was forced to accept former German holdings. Russia, excluded from the peace talks, resented the reestablishment of a Polish nation and 3 independent Baltic states on the lands that had been part of Russian Empire. All of these discontented nations bided their time. They waited for a chance to revise the peace settlement in their favor. Well, I'm gonna do an internet search. This is unprecedented for the Context is Everything Media Network, but I'm gonna call an audible here, and I'm gonna type in, was Russia an ally in WW1? The Triple Entente, this is Google, was the name given to the alliance partnership between Russia, France, and Britain during World War I. These countries were also known as the Allies and were fighting against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Why did they lose so much land in World War I? Look at Russia. Look at this. This doesn't make any sense. If they were on the winning side, right, why would they be subject to such losses? So, like, this is before. See, Russia. This is after. See, this whole strip is partitioned, no longer Russia. How does that make any sense? I don't get it. Listen, am I a Russian apologist? I don't think so. But to me, it seems like that doesn't make any sense. They won. Why did they lose such massive amounts of land? That's enormous amounts of land. I don't get it. I do not understand. And the textbook is not explaining it clearly enough. All they said was, and I quote, Russia, excluded from the peace talks, I would like to know why, resented the reestablishment of Polish nations and 3 independent Baltic states on the lands that had been part of the Russian Empire. Why wouldn't you explain that when you're writing a world history textbook? Doesn't make any sense. Listen, do I support what Russia's doing today? No. Do I think that it would make sense if a textbook explained why the winning side, Russia, allies, just read it off of Google, why they would lose thousands of square miles of land, even though they were on the winning side of World War I. Winning, I guess, is a faulty term, a problematic term when it comes to 8.5 million casualties and deaths. But they were on the Allies, and the Allies were the ones that forced the treaty to be signed by the losing side, which Russia was not. Russia was on the Allies' side. Why did they lose thousands of square miles of land? I don't understand. I do not understand, Sam. I do not understand. Does that make me racist? Leave it in the comments. Hopes for global peace. The Paris Peace Conference did offer one beacon of hope in the League of Nations. In the aftermath of the war, millions of people looked to the League of Nations to ensure the peace. More than 40 nations joined the League. They agreed to negotiate disputes rather than resort to war. Members of the League promised to take common action, economic or even military, against any aggressor state. All I'm saying is, why wouldn't the textbook explain why Russia was damaged by the war? They say one sentence about they were excluded from peace talks, but I'd like to know why they're excluded from peace talks. Doesn't that make sense? I thought that we were talking about them being on the good guys' side. I don't get it. I would like to know why, and I would like the textbook to explain it, since the textbook's duty is to educate. Why would you leave such a, I think, an obvious question unanswered when you look at the map and you say, wait a minute, wasn't Russia on the side that won? because of all the deaths, I do the quotes because there's no winning in that sort of a bloody horror show. I don't get it. Wilson's dream had become a reality, yet his own Senate refused to ratify the treaty, and the United States never joined the League. Disillusioned with the war, the United States chose to play lone hand in world affairs. As time soon revealed, the League was powerless to prevent war. Still, it was a first step towards something genuinely new, an international organization dedicated to maintaining the peace and advancing the interests of all the people. That's it. God bless. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the weather.